think I'll just keep my mouth shut and wait. And it's like, the problem with that theory is that as you keep your mouth shut and wait, you get weaker and older, and as those who you aren't pushing back against advance, they get stronger. And so, you might think, well, I'll handle it in 10 years. It's like, no, you won't. There'll be a lot less of you in 10 years than there is now if you keep retreating, and the thing that you're retreating from will just get larger as it devours whatever's in its path.
It's unpopular children who say, oh, well, the game is only going to be the one I want to play. And those children, other children just move away from. They alienate and isolate them instantly, and they go look for other play partners. Those kids are no fun. And it's because they're too insistent that their subjective state dominate the social space. And that's exactly what's happening on the identity politics front. It's like, well, I feel I'm this way, and you better treat me like that or else. It's like, you are a bad little kid. You're a kid that never learned how to play, and you're being fostered in your juvenile delusion by your narcissistic, virtue-signaling parents who aren't sensible enough to help you guide yourself towards the establishment of an identity that would allow you to be appreciated by other children.
When the more students respect teachers and believe that you have their best interest at heart, the easier it is to facilitate a culturally sustaining learning environment. Education certainly has its element of chaos, given that we are dealing with multiple human beings in the classroom, each bringing his or her own indeterminacy and potential. With this in mind, we could say that the teacher's role is to cultivate order in the midst of chaos. Nowadays, most of the teachers complain that kids these days are so disrespectful, or my students come to class just to play and need to learn how to listen to instructions. My question is always, what have you done to earn your students' trust and respect?
So that's another thing to think about if you are a teacher or someone entrusted with the care of other people, is that you're going to have to take your blows to push back against enforced and mandatory idol worship, let's say. But that's a lot easier battle than losing control of your own soul. So, and I really mean that. So, there are times where all you get to do is pick which hell you're going to wander into, because you're already there in some regard. And I think we're living in institutions now that are corrupt enough often so that if you happen to be tangled up inside of them, those are basically your choices. But, you still try to put yourself together so you have potential alternatives at hand, so you can't be threatened too direly with the loss of your livelihood.
Are you so sure it's better to rule over hell than just to be a servant in hell? It's not obvious to me. That's not success by any stretch of the imagination. The most powerful devil. That's like the worst possible failure. And so, you're called upon to take the lessons that you've been taught in a university like this, that attempts to teach you to abide by the eternal verities, to sacrifice your own narrow pretensions in the highest sense to something that's truly better, not because you should in some finger-wagging sense, but because there is truly nothing better, and perhaps you don't have the wisdom to see that, because it's difficult to see. It's difficult to have a purview broad enough to encompass those expanse of time and community and see what pattern of behavior is to be manifested in proper service to balance all of that in some musical manner. But that's definitely the appropriate pathway. It's the best possible path of action, and anything you pursue that isn't that is insufficient, especially for people of your ability.
In light of all the challenges we face today, perhaps the theme should be extended to take a stand for teachers and education unions. The original aim of World Teachers' Day was to highlight the contributions of teachers to education. We need to highlight how they help to shape a profession which must continue to attract and retain the best and the brightest as educators. Students need to understand that they must respect their teachers from the bottom of their hearts and not feign obsequious behavior and formalities. Students must acknowledge the efforts carried by their teachers to teach them.
Use minimum emotion, minimum force. Start talking to parents, because what you'll find as a teacher is that 85% of parents agree with you, or 90% or 95%. especially when it comes to the propriety of 144 quadruple D giant-breasted trans teachers teaching shop, for example. There are really very few people who think that that's a good idea. And so, although they seem to exist, perversely enough, and I mean that with the precise meaning of that term. And then, strap yourself in, because you're in for quite an adventure if you decide to go up against, Moloch, let's say, and you want to do that lightly. So you got to gather your family and your friends around you, make yourself a plan, lay out an alternative pathway to something approximating economic security, be prepared to move if you have to. There's a walloping teacher shortage in the United States, and there's still places there that are vaguely sane. And so prepare yourself, but like I said, you're gonna fight this battle one way or another. We're all in it.
I was trying to teach kids how to write. They were in their 4th year of university in the honors psych program. You'd think they'd bloody well already know how to write, but they didn't. I'd have them write a 4-page essay on a given topic, and then they had to rewrite that to a 6-page essay, and then they had to rewrite that to an 8-page essay. And the first essay I graded, formulaic, boring, everything about it was wrong. And so those are hard to grade. It was often easier just to rewrite those essays than to grade them. Even in an essay like that, there is usually like 1 sentence or 2 sentences buried on like page 3 that was an actual thought and reasonably clearly stated and somewhat gripping, It was like the person popped out from all the background rubbish and said, well, what about this? And if you saw that and checked it and said, hey, you hit the mark right there, the next essay would be like 2/3 that. By the 3rd essay, they had written the best thing they'd ever written in their life.
Students in schools need to respect the sacrifices made by their teachers for them, and they also need to applaud the intentions and expectations their teachers have for them. Secondly, a positive parent-teacher relationship helps your child feel good about school and be successful in school. A student's behavior shows his teacher in a positive light and creates a favorable image.
You could also imagine that you don't have anything better to do than what's right. And I don't just mean morally better in terms of your traditional duty. I mean literally better. There is nothing that you have to do that's better, all things considered, than to do what's right. That's why it's right. And you know that, and the reason you know that in part, because when you don't do what's right, your conscience tortures you. And that pesky little thing, and it won't go away, and that's pretty weird. Like, what's that about? Why can't you just give it a slap and, keep wandering on your merry way? And the answer is, well, that isn't how reality is constituted. So, do what's right, and see what happens. One of the things I did come to understand is that the adventure of your life is embedded in truthful speech. So, if you dissemble or remain silent, then you're hiding your light under a bushel. You're not revealing into the world, unfolding into the world who you are. And so that means you're not living. And you're going to suffer and be weak and waste yourself if you're not living. You got to ask yourself when you go and do what you do, like, is this making you stronger? Is this making you weaker? And if it's making you weaker, then you got to ask yourself, do you really want to be weaker? Because the weaker you get, the more you're tyrannized. And then worse than that, like the weaker you get, the more bitter you get. And the more you'll work towards terrible things, the more you'll snap at your wife, the more you'll kick your kids, Like, it's no joke to be tyrannized at work. And so I would say you have an ethical responsibility as a citizen to forthrightly confront creeping tyranny no matter where it occurs. And part of what we're learning, I would say, from these stories, if we're learning anything at all, is that if you're aimed at the good, which is a question you really got to ask yourself, if you're genuinely aimed at the good, then take heart, because you're a lot stronger than you think.
Students can show their consideration for their teachers by obeying their instructions in the class. The class is not a picnic for the teachers either. Still, they spend their time by teaching their lessons to students by standing the entire duration of the class. and they do this day in day out for the entire academic year. Students can at least show the courtesy by remaining attentive and participating in the class. In today's environment, how teachers can stand against wokeness in schools and get kids to care and respect them again, feel free to let us know in the comments section below. If you find this content interesting, then give this video a big thumb up and make sure to hit that subscribe button below. See you in the next video.